The address of the Iberian Caucasian Movement to the European Council and the USA. The animal has no nationality. Zviad Gamsahurdia. Today, it is not a secret to anyone what was the role of European Council and the USA government in 1991 22nd December tragedy, military coup in Georgia. The validity of their participation became apparent to the naked eye when they supported Soviet Empire when Georgia was restoring its independence. With the silence of the West, evermore the international organizations and President Bush openly opposed the Georgian national hero, President Zviad Gamsahurdia, who at that time was already in power and had been elected as the President of the Republic of Georgia by 90% of the population of the country. Though this fact became known to the whole world, nobody even tried to respond to the anti-constitutional action. That's why Zviad Gamsahurdia, who came to power after 30-year-old fighting against communist regime, already in his asylum to Chechnya, in his interview to mass media, explained why he had not achieved the support or friendliness of the West. Our goal was to aspire to political independence of Georgia. We did not obey to the dictate of the Western countries and did not act in the interests of the West. We did not let them to become Georgia the colonial state. That was the reason of coming to power of the CIA and Euro-American imperialism agent Eduard Shevardnadze in Georgia. The West is fighting against any kind of national movement. Its goal is the destruction of the concept of nation and the creation of a unified global conglomerate with one world government, the so-called New World Order that aims at the destruction of all countries, regardless of their nationality, whether they are Christian or Muslim. With these words, President Gamsahurdia predicted or foretold and made known to the world society already in 1992 the plans later implemented in Serbia, the Middle East, Syria, Egypt, Iraq. Today, when it is condemned and eliminated Soviet Union, it really had to be eliminated. One thing should be underlined, that in the period of the Soviet ecumenism, the national movement in Georgia, without any help from outside, did not stop its activity. It maintained its slogan, language, motherland, religion. The national movement of Georgia always supported the globalization, giving an example of devotion to the other republics of the Soviet Union under the leadership of the most devoted and intrepid dissidents Zviad Gamsahurdia and Merab Kostava. Tbilisi was a center of national movement, especially in 1970s and 1980s. If we go back a bit to the latest history, it's also known to everybody that the so-called perestroika was inspired under the guidance of 1989 9 April tragedy organizers Gorbachev Shevardnadze. Gorbachev was awarded with Nobel Prize for that so-called perestroika and aimed at the globalization, the reanimation of the Soviet Empire, which was greatly supported openly by President Bush, who before the whole civilized world so impudently announced from Ukraine that the President of the Republic of Georgia, Zviad Gamsachurdia, swam against the flow. With these words, he expressed his attitude toward the countries who wanted to live their own national life and were against the globalization. This attitude of the USA government was expressed by the USA General Secretary Baker by the bless of President Bush. As Zviad Gamsachurdia continues in his interview, the USA General Secretary James Baker openly addressed to the criminal groups in Georgia and instigated them to military coup. The USA was perfectly informed about the members of the opposition against President Gamsachurdia that they were criminals and former communists. The only aim of the military coup was to settle down Georgia into perestroika. As for the later period of our country, when in the result of the so-called Rose Revolution, Mikhail Saakashvili came to power in Georgia, it's also not a secret to anyone that when Eduard Shevardnadze had been bankrupted politically, and just because of that, he was changed by the chairman of Citizens Union, Mikhail Saakashvili. It was just the West that paved the way to its cunning goals, anti-Georgian terrorists, so-called national movement. Saakashvili, who from his first steps as the so-called president of Georgia, with the great support of the ambassador of the USA to Georgia, Miles, and the Russian envoy Ivanov, started his fighting against Georgian people. Tens of thousands of innocent people were jailed and were unbelievably tortured. The rape of male prisoners, 2008 provocative war, where Georgia lost territories, were increased by 20%. Particularly brutal ethnic persecution of the people of Georgian nationality. Granting of Georgia's citizenship to the foreigners, dismissal of large part of the population of Georgia, make other denominations equal to the capacity of the Orthodox Church, state religion council, the so-called federalization plan, which already in 90s by the Shevardnadze followers, Khidashvili, Usupashvili, Chiaberashvili, Jgerenaya, Berzenishvili, and other traitors, was on the agenda of the conference in Iberian state of the USA, where these above-mentioned traitors represented the so-called Georgian-Abkhaz conflict. See proceedings of the aspects of Georgian-Abkhaz conflict. According to these proceedings, Georgia faces the threat of final dismantle if Georgia is still the United States. The issue was officially unveiled on December 2004 when the so-called president of Georgia, Mikhail Saakashvili, ordered the non-governmental organizations to submit the project of federalization of Georgia as soon as possible. The project, which is so shamelessly still on the agenda in today's Parliament of Georgia after the so-called Saakashvili overthrow. It once again proves that from Shevardnadze's power up to now, nothing has changed in our country. Though Russia was conducted by the West, but it always defends its own personal interests as well. The population of Georgia is profoundly alarmed by the fact that Georgia is permanently haunted by the so-called experts serving as pillars to governing national movement members of the so-called parliament. Their shameless claims about Saakashvili's merits and services done for our country are accompanied with unveiled intrusion in the domestic affairs of Georgia, aiming at having marionette government and appointed presidents. Considering the above mentioned, it will cite President Zviad Gamsachurdia's speech made on 26 May 1990, We are face to face with Satan, the dragon, but with the help of Saint George we'll be able to defeat it. Otherwise, it will devour our historical destiny. This cosmic beast is going to trample us down. It has appeared and announced, this is a national movement. In reality, it is Antichrist, disguised as national movement. It is Barabbas. Actually, for the first time in the history of Georgian nation, the damned Saakashvili, supported by the USA and the European Council, came on behalf of the national movement, and his prosecution seems to be out of question, though it is well known that even aged presidents in other countries have been convicted and are still in jail. It must be also mentioned that in 1991 in Moscow was held the conference where by 38 European countries was signed the document condemning the throwing down of the legal governments. We demand the peaceful withdrawal of the terrorist who is full with hatred towards the Georgian people, legalizing the alienation of Georgian lands made by Eduard Shevardnadze, and who is so greatly approved by you, the enemy of Georgian people, Mikhail Saakashvili, from our country, until the patience of Georgian people is still controlled. Otherwise, the whole responsibility of the unforeseen events will lay upon you. The head of the Iberian Caucasian Movement, Beso, Mikava, the press service of the Iberian Caucasian Movement, Kakhiani. Tbilisi, December 15, 2013.